meeting of the Scott County Board of Adjustments will begin. Our first order of business is approval of the February minutes.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from the February board meeting.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye. Our February meeting minutes have been approved. Now, for those of you that plan to speak tonight, Mr. Perkins will swear you in.
If you can stand and raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the statement you're to give tonight with the truth to the best of your information and belief? Thank you all.
All right. Applications, the old applications, we will postpone S 2022-04 and move on to new applications. The first one will be S 2022-11. David Belsick is applying for a variance.
Oh, excuse me, Madam Chair. Did you say A is also postponed? I've got B marked out.
A.
So both the olds are, okay, thank you.
You kind of missed the fun update, so
Okay.
we're waiting on forms. Get up anyway now.
So this is S-2022-11, which is a variance to the rear yard setback from 100 feet to 75 feet for pool construction. The property address 102 Alexander Jet Lane. It's zoned A1 and it is a 5-acre, not 5-acre property. It's a 1.0 approximately property. Staff does recommend approval of the variance application. This is an aerial shot of the property. It's part of the Rifted Meadows cluster subdivision, so there's preserve track that kind of surrounds it, and it does have an additional landscape buffer because I believe it either borders a portion of the preserve or a non-cluster development part of the subdivision. So this is our findings for necessary for granting variances. When we're considering variances, we refer to KRS 100.243, specifically outlining what the findings are that are required for a variance to be granted, such as it not affecting public health, safety, or welfare, altering the character. And then the board has to consider whether or not that rises from special circumstances that does not apply to land in general vicinity, that the strict application of provisions of regulation would deprive the applicant of reasonable use of land or create an unnecessary hardship, or that the circumstances are a result of actions of the applicant taken subsequent to the adoption of zoning regulations, and that we should deny anything that arises from circumstances that violate or willfully violated the zoning ordinances. This is the subdivision kind of breakdown. I've labeled properties that had variances with approvals and properties that have had variances with denials. Those that have requested approvals are those that typically involve the rear yard setback, and those have kind of ranged from 50 feet to about like 98, I think is one of them. That one was just for like a very small home addition, and the 50 feet was for like a detached garage. In the instances of approvals, those have been more, again, involved with the rear yard setback versus the denials are very large setbacks or changes to the side yard setbacks, because with cluster subdivision regulations, the front yard setback is 50 feet, the rear yard is 100 feet, and the side yards are 25 feet to kind of allow for the landscape buffer, and so they make a deeper rear yard and then a narrower side yard. And so, just for, again, the landscape buffer purposes. So there is a difference to typical A1 zone properties with the 50 all the way around. And then the site is noted in red. So the pool would kind of be placed around where that square is located. I did my best to do an aerial measurement with our existing system. It'll be observing the 25-foot setback line from the sides, but again, it does go into the rear yard setback by that 25 feet or so. There have been multiple applications for pools in this neighborhood. I don't have a larger aerial shot of the property, but there is probably about 10 out of the 30 or so lots that have a pool, some of which are much closer to the rear property line than this application, and those are some of which are kind of in that interior one where that rear yard is not really using the landscape, or not really to consider the landscape buffer that's there. It's just a deep road yard for consistency. So staff these are my findings here, so these are the 4 that are specifically referenced. Larger variances for rear yard setbacks have been granted for the construction of pool and other accessory structures. The Rifton's Meadow subdivision is a cluster subdivision. I kind of beat that one into the ground a little bit, so I won't read out the whole remainder of it. Approval of the variance would not adversely impact the public health, safety, or welfare, nor alter the character of the general vicinity. There's a lot of pools, a lot of people go into their setbacks, and then staff does believe that this application meets the findings requirement of KRS 100.243. So, staff does recommend approval of the variance application with the 3 traditional conditions of approval tied with our variance applications, that they adhere to all local regulations per the ordinance and subdivision regulations, they adhere to all other federal, state, and local regulations, and that they obtain a building permit from the building inspection offices prior to any construction on the site.
Thank you. Do you have any questions, anybody?
No complaints from surrounding neighbors or from those?
Just questions as to what a variance is. It's our usual type thing, nothing arguing for, against, or nothing crazy.
Once you explain to them.
Yeah, once they're like, oh, it's a pool? Cool, I have one too. Great, and then they just leave. So, it's a very quick one.
I brought some images. I was going to do a 1-200, but I thought that would be too Toyota-like, so I didn't do that. I do have some images, and I took measurements with stakes. I also have checked, I'll just let you all have those. I don't know. And I checked with my neighbors. I actually put a fence up because I have dogs and I just don't want to get out.
Charlie, did you swear everybody in? Yes, you did. Yes, you did. I completely forgot.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And I checked with them before I put the fence up, because you want to have a good relationship with your neighbors. I even told them my intentions of putting a pool in, and if they had an issue with it, please let me know. And they were all good. Actually, the neighbor, if you're facing my street, my house, to the right has a pool.
I did not. I cut it really short.
Which they'll be welcome to.
If we approve this.
Come on.
Do you all have any questions of Mr. Wilson?
And I had it staked up, from the back of the deck, 100 feet all the way back. And then I broke it in increments to where you can see how far from each stake it was. And also, of course, the electrical lines staying off at least 25 feet. And it's even greater than that. And then with my ladders, my neighbors, I measured 25 feet off that. But from that first stake, I'm 38 more feet until I hit the edge of my deck. So I'm in good shape, I think.
All right.
That's it, unless you have any questions.
No, thank you. We don't have to guess.
No. Can we have everybody do this?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I would like that.
Make it the standard.
I told her, I said, do you want me to do a 1-200? She said, that would have been really nice. I said, you would have really thought bad of me if I'd have done that.
Yeah.
Quick visual, perfect.
I'll accept the motion for,
I make a motion that we approve application S-22-11 based upon staff recommendations.
do I have a second?
I'll second.
All of those in favor say aye. Aye. S-22 is approved. 11 is approved. Thank you. She'll be in,
Nope.
She'll be in touch with you.
Yeah, I'll send out letters of notice of follow-up letters tomorrow, and then you can pretty much take it and run where.
Well, I'm gonna also do an 811 just to make sure I have no issues there.
That'll be perfect, yeah. Especially since I'm assuming it's in ground. It'll be
Yeah.
good in your
I
best.
don't want something crazy to happen there.
Oh yeah. Take out the whole neighborhood.
Thanks. Thank you all, I appreciate it.
All right, then the next one is S-2022-12.
Thank you. This is a variance application at 1116 Old Oxford Road. It's a variance to the side yard setback from 50 feet to 25 feet for the construction of a 2,400 square foot accessory structure. It's zoned A1 agricultural, but it is an undersized lot in the A1 district. It is 1.76 acres as opposed to the traditional 5 acres. Staff does recommend approval. We'll get into some further details on the property, but we'll discuss it later. This is an aerial shot of the property. It's off of Old Oxford, and then I believe it's, what neighborhood is that one?
Rocky Creek is to the east.
That's what I thought. I get them all tangled up in that area. So Rocky Creek is to the east, and then Old Oxford and everything, and then Connector is due south of the property. These are findings. I'm not going to list them unless you really want me to read them out again. We're doing 3 of these, so I figured probably the first time is pretty good. The red square is approximately where the property would be, where the structure would be placed. It'll be just in that setback area. Again, it is an undersized lot of record, so it is kind of, these requirements for setbacks are made for the larger lots of 5 acres or greater. So usually when we see these smaller lots and they're dealing with some terrain difficulties, which I will go in shortly, there is tendency to require some additional assistance at times. It is an optimally shaped property with its squareness. Most of the time these are very narrow, very awkward shaped creekside properties, such as the South Weisenberger Mill we saw about 4 months ago, where it was like that odd shape and it was in a lot of floodplain and everything. So there's a lot of factors that kind of make those weird looking lots. This is the topographical view of the property. I believe you guys have a exhibit from Ben, the commission engineer, just kind of showing it imposed with the aerial of the property. There's a noted depression in the property. It takes up a good portion of it, probably about a third to half of the property square footage and buildable area. We are unsure if it qualifies as like a sinkhole or a karst depression. It would require someone to come out, like a geotechnical engineer or certified geologist, to come out and determine whether or not that would be buildable and what mitigation would need to be done to ensure that it isn't negatively impacting the Rocky Creek neighborhood or any other surrounding properties, should it be filled in or have utilities run through it and compromise that land. So there's a condition of approval in that this would require some type of documentation saying that this is a buildable piece, this is not a buildable piece, should this be approved. I received a report from a neighbor nearby mentioning concerns about the operations of a landscape business on this property. And while the variance is the main part of this conversation today, I believe that we cannot forego this kind of evidence that I've collected in a trip that I took out yesterday with various visuals of everything. The bottom photo is the kind of parking lot with, I believe, 7 or so vehicles in that lot. I went out around like 10 a.m. so everyone was out on the sites. If this is anticipated to be or interpreted to be a landscaping business, that's where they likely were. And then kind of from the right column has the gators and other wood chipper properties, and then the kerosene container with a battery on it. I didn't get a good shot with both of them, but that is kerosene in a pump that's on a wood pallet, which I'm a little bit concerned about. The middle photo is I believe a commercial grade wood chipper. I didn't really want to mess with it. I don't know how wood chippers work, and I've seen enough traumatic TV shows and funny zombie movies that I don't really approach those willingly. And then on the opposite side of the wood chipper is pallets of building materials, stone, playground equipment, and then I believe there's at least 6 snowplow front pieces for a vehicle, which is enough to warrant some concern from us. So again, this isn't an application that involves that use. However, I mean, this does not have an active conditional use permit under the current owner. So if this does get considered beyond today, we would require that the applicant would, or you could recommend that the applicant get a conditional use permit and kind of go from there. That's up to your guys' discretion. We have not issued a letter of zoning violation to this property. Joe's been out and we've kind of recently found out about this in the last week or so. So we've been kind of doing and collecting what we can and then leaving it up to you guys to interpret as you may, what this operation may or may not be. These are my findings requirements. So our findings, it is an undersized lot in the A1 district, and the square shape is optimal for development and construction. Again, there may be some requirements with the terrain that would require additional support with a variance. There's a possible non-buildable depression in the rear and center of the property, and that a geologist or geotechnical engineer would need to review the depression. While not explicitly considered, any construction in that area that would later be determined to be non-buildable would pose a threat to public health, safety, or welfare. But if it ends up being a buildable lot, which we assumed non-buildable for this situation, if they aren't building on that property, it would not negatively impact or alter the character or general vicinity, nor impact the public health, safety, or welfare if it's out of that depression and it's constructed appropriately. It does meet the findings requirement for KRS 100.243 for the variance side of things, but we have found evidence that may suggest that a business is operating on the site, and that while it may be justified to have a variance, there are possible concerns that the variance may further enable operations of a potential zoning ordinance violation, in that they're having a business operation without a conditional use permit in the A1. In light of that, we do recommend I recommend approval of the variance given the 4 conditions above, the first 3 of which are those typical of variance, and then the 4th is the certified geologist or geotechnical engineer performing a study on the depression in the property. I retained the approval because I did. I can't exactly explain that one.
Is the applicant present?
No.
Okay.
Can we ask?
Can I start a question on that? Educate us. Okay, so it's an accessory building, but there's no house there, so it's accessory to nothing yet. And they appear to be out of business. It's not even on the books. There's so many things going on here. I'm not sure if you're even looking at what we need to be looking
Well,
at.
I got to admit, I was looking at, I assumed there was a house somewhere and I wasn't seeing it.
Not at this time, no.
Well, it does create a serious question about an accessory building
To what?
to not having, at least not necessarily a lawful primary use. But if I may just hesitate a second on that, because that's one thing I don't understand. We're assuming that the closed depression is what it appears to be, and therefore non-buildable. But yet, I think the application is for this to be outside that closed depression, and yet one of the conditions is he's got to have it studied anyway.
With the drawing itself, it was determined to be kind of ambiguous if it is not on the edge of the depression or otherwise. The drawing that they submitted is not to scale. I think it's in the stack packet as such, and so it's hard to determine exactly where it would be. The square is just kind of a general idea. It may or may not be in the karst depression, which is why we put that condition, so that if it is or is on the border, then it has that protection for that portion of the property.
And then he has a drawing.
Yes.
For a house and a pool
I
and
think
a patio.
if I could offer a suggestion, I mean, you could just amend the condition to say, you know, if construction is proposed within that depressed area, they need to first have a geotechnical engineer or other qualified professional investigate it, you know, prior to the issuance of a building permit. And we send all the approval, you know, if it is approved, we send all the approval letters to building inspection anyway, so they can sort of flag that as well. But that way, if they are avoiding it, then there's no need for them to go through that you know, sort of expense or trouble.
Well, yeah, and I mean, unless the construction is to be in what it appears to be, then we can't approve that without it being proven that it's not. But if it's not, we can't require them to go and do engineering that's not otherwise appropriate. Isn't our GIS system alone, though? Can't we measure out and see if it's inside that closed depression or not?
Well, I mean, it's,
within
I think,
feet?
yeah, I mean, I think it's just, what she was saying is it's just hard to know from their hand-drawn drawing whether or not that will end up being inside the depressed area. I mean, we have pretty reasonable understanding of where the depressed area boundaries are, other than the requested setback variance. It's hard to say otherwise
Have a
where
distance
Even if
from
we
that.
make
the
that
boundaries of the
decision
building.
on the fact that they have to be out there, so okay, the building's fine. But what about the fact that it's still an accessory building without a house with a business going on? I'm still
Well,
confused what we're looking at here.
that is, I would have a problem if it's an accessory structure and there is no primary use.
That's what, yeah.
I would have a problem if there is a primary use and it is an illegal use. I don't know that it is an illegal use. I'm assuming there's at least some argument that it's grandfathered in, and therefore it's a legal non-conforming use. It's been there 10 years and we haven't enforced anything against it, and it's legal. Not if you're going to expand it, but then I'm not going to bring that up tonight.
It's like your application.
Have we done a conditional use on this property before?
I have not found a conditional.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
This is the neighbor out on the
Okay.
other
If
side.
I could ask one question while he's coming up. I thought we had a guy who had a business like this, and moved the business from here to Lyle Road.
It's
That was
Corky.
Corky.
This is the original Corky location,
It
and
was
then he
Tom
moved
Price's
up.
property.
So that guy moved and somebody else moved in?
Yes.
This property was not used for that. This property's not been there 10 years. I've been there
No.
3 years.
This isn't Corky's old
Yeah,
property.
you're,
it's
y'all
just-
thinking of Old Oxford Drive. This is Old
Yes.
Oxford Road.
This is
property
a block over.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
We both,
Before you get started, I'm sorry, Elise, can I ask you a question
Yes.
about the middle left picture? Can you say a battery is hooked up to that middle?
I believe so. I don't have it in this one. It looked suspiciously like a battery.
Well, then I went to the wrong place.
So, if that's the
Is
case.
that his power supply? Is that what somebody
If that's the
said?
case.
Oh, that's
I-
illegal.
I can't help but say this, because that's my
I
professional
went to the
background.
right place.
If that's the case, that breaks every environmental rule known to man.
This is like the north.
I have the photos on my phone. Give me a second. I can pull up the battery and see
And I'm
if
not the one
it's okay.
throwing it.
My copy of it.
Yeah. All right, if I might make a suggestion, gentlemen,
Yes.
your name again, please?
Billy Wise. Billy Wise.
Oh, okay. And you've been there next door since before this began?
Before it began, we purchased the property at the same time. We both bought the
Okay,
property.
but you were familiar with it before this began?
Which house is yours?
I am this house right here, one to the left, basically there.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, you're the one.
All right, in that case, if I can make a suggestion, we need to take testimony from this gentleman about whether or not there is a bona fide primary use on the property. What did you say the zoning of this is?
A1.
Okay, so this, and what are they supposedly doing out there?
They're operating a business,
But what kind of?
Well, he's a landscaping and he has a new business that he started. It says it is asphalt, concrete, and general
All right,
contractor.
regardless, none of that's permitted in an A1 zone. So my suggestion is we take testimony from the neighboring property owner, establish that this is not a non-conforming 10-year plus existing business. And as such, we can't give them any approvals. The ordinance says very clearly, if they're in violation, we can't approve anything that they've got.
Yeah, there's a jumper battery.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
If she could get my flash drive up, I have more pictures of the employees. Because
Yeah, that's-
they're there in the morning, for an hour.
Super clean and safe. This is the photo.
He's working.
Please state your name again, please.
My name's Billy Wise.
Can't get the.
and your address, please?
It's 1110 on Oxford Road.
Your house is pretty.
Thank you.
Cause I passed through, cause I saw the 130, and then I was looking for the 116, and I saw yours, and I came back, I'm like, oh, wait,
Didn't you,
that's just.
you had to set yours, didn't we do a,
I had a variance on mine for the
yes,
size.
because yours is
Yeah.
wedged in that
Yeah.
triangle lot,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Let's do it. PJ, do you mind,
Technical.
what's happening? I'm just trying to show the desktop screen because I can't do this on the presentation mode. And this is
Installation of residential.
not showing any of that. What's it? We can't open it because the hard drive is full.
And I want to clear, move it over, you got that in the.
I'll clear out the hard drive later, but we can't do that right now. There's a ton of old comp plan presented.
How long have they been doing this?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Gigabytes of comp plan.
We started out, we both purchased the property with Mr. Price at the same
Right.
time. I started to build, and I contacted him before I built, because I wanted to know what he was going to do with his land. And he said his intentions were that he lived across the street, and that he was going to build a house in a couple of years, that he was going to throw a little bit of equipment over there. he recently contacted me before this variance hearing and said that he had found some more property and that he was going to be cleaning up, had one more big burn. He burns, that debris you see comes not from that property, it comes from his business. They bring it in there and they burn it. And I had not heard anything from him until I got the variance hearing and the letter in the mail. And I asked him what was going on, and he said that he was unable to get what he wanted on the other properties, and so he was going to build this building. I tried to be nice. I tried to say, can you give me a time frame on when? I didn't want to file a complaint, but he got kind of upset when I asked him to give me a time frame on when he thought he would be out of there, that he didn't really want to commit to anything. And it's kind of just expanded and expanded. It started off with just one gravel driveway and a couple of trucks, and he brings some debris in here, and it's just gone and gone and gone. I have no problem with a building and a house and a pool. It sounds awesome. Be right next to mine, it would fit right in. I don't think that's what the building is for. The building is just for the business. I think the sketch you give is not the scale, but it's just looking at the approximation of where he's saying it. Now, I did see her drawing it. I think the building is much bigger than the little red dot. I would say that depression area that was shown on that lot does not look anywhere near as big as it looked on that drawing. I think there is room to build there a house. It's just got to come much farther up than what he had on his sketch. You have to be almost up to the top of that driveway. And then you got plenty of room for a septic in. But it would need some dirt. It would need approval to do some dirt, just to keep the low lying areas.
Well, he's labeled the building 40 by 60.
Yeah, it's a good size building. And it's going to be probably 16 to 20 feet tall. I'm sure.
I can't remember. Yeah, he gave that other dimension also.
Right.
Unfortunately, larger.
Oh, that's okay.
25.
I mean, will they not open?
The new business is the Knox contracting. He just recently started that one. That's the one that's doing contracting. His other one is the turf.
Nope, it does not, it's gonna pop up down here.
We can
That's
see
all right.
it. We can see it.
So this is the meeting in the afternoon. This was a Friday. I think it was a payday because they hung out pretty long that day and were getting paid. There was a dumpster up front. He has moved the dumpster to the back. Just go down a little bit. So there's one video on the top. I don't know if it'll play.
I don't know either.
There is one video. This was in the garbage today. This was what this morning. I don't know.
I saw all those trucks last night. It's parking lots of long trucks.
Oh, this actually is mine.
And that depression was like the same company. It's like
Here we go.
So that's, they pull in and they park over there.
Oh my.
It's a fairly short.
Oh, yeah, it is.
I couldn't get it on my phone to email. That's been unloading some debris to the pile. And,
Well, don't you think we've really heard enough here?
Yeah, we've heard that.
yeah, I'd like
We're
to see
sorry.
this resolved, and I didn't want to bring this to this, but I didn't want it to become a situation like Old Oxford Drive that you were talking about where, and I know the property you're talking about, but he had a house there and he kind of expanded in the back of it there. But I actually watched his hearing for his conditional use, I think, and he agreed to stop burning on his property as part of it there. He stopped doing huge burns. He kind of breaks them up into smaller piles now, at least, and burns them. But he told me that after the fire department's come out a couple times, the one time the fire department put the fire out, and it just smoldered for like a week and covered everything with ash and stuff. And so after that one, he said he wasn't going to do it anymore, that he didn't want to be that neighbor. And then it kind of just started back, and the piles got smaller. So.
40 by 60 by 25.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Charlie, advise us how.
Well,
we-
first off, he's got an illegal use on his property, therefore under our ordinance, we can't approve him for anything. An accessory building needs to be with the principal use that's lawful. This is not a principal use that's lawful, so I don't see any way we approve an accessory building to an illegal use. So my recommendation is no, we deny it and send him packing and then send enforcement in his direction as well.
So that would be from the office, Joe, and we'll handle that.
I'll take a motion or accept the motion.
I'll make a motion that we deny application S 2022-12, variance of side yard setback at 1116 Old Oxford Drive. They are in, what do you call that?
It is a, it is
Illegal
not a, it
operation?
is, yeah, it is illegal use on the property and as such not qualified for our approval of a variance for an accessory to an illegal use. And I'd like to include that in motion.
Okay, an illegal use of a property, and so we cannot approve an accessory, there's something else in the middle there, Charlie.
And it's all right here.
Yeah, and then, we don't have to say anything as far as a letter being served or that's outside of our.
No.
Okay.
Staff-
Joe's not
Any
in.
more work?
Joe's not in, so we haven't been able to issue anything.
Do what?
Joe is out of town, so we can't issue anything right now. So we're kind of like, you guys have to kind of make.
The letter will get sent next week when he's
There
back.
you go, that'll make you happy.
Now, I'll accept in a second. There in a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Appreciate people coming to good neighbors, but I feel for you.
Thank you very much.
So then that moves us to S 2022-13. We appreciate your patience.
Oh, it's been a long
Oh, yeah.
an hour or something.
We've been running hours with 9 cases. I don't know how we got through the most recent one that fast. We just were like, all right, we're done. We're done.
Well, those were easy.
Yeah, they were. It was great. It was nice to have things straightforward. This is the variance to the side yard setback from 50 feet to 6 feet for a 300 square foot accessory structure at the property addressed 629 Glass Pipe. It's an A1 zone property with approximately 7 acres of land on it, and staff would recommend approval of this application. This is an aerial shot of the property. It's deceptively flat, I think is a good way to call it. It's on Glass Pipe. You can see a lot of variation. We'll kind of go into it further. This is our variance statement. This is the topographical variation that we're rolling with right here. I did do a calculation for the steepness. There's a kind of a value of steepness where what would be qualified as like an environmentally sensitive area, where it's 10% change. So for every 10 feet horizontally, there's 1 foot of vertical increase. This is twice that, so this is a very hilly area. You can see I called it a river one time and everyone got sour with me. So the water feature that goes by north of it, because I can't call it a river because I forget who. Creek sounds better, but
Yeah, I don't think there's any rivers in Scott County.
there's not. There's absolutely not. But one time I did, and everyone was like, it's like it's okay.
I knew what he meant.
But so this, you can see the significant topographical variation. It's difficult to see with all the lines, but the red square, just kind of south of the hull, is where the shed would be placed. From staff opinion, it appears to be the flattest part of the property, besides where the home is placed. And even the home, if you look at kind of front shots of it, it does have kind of built into the hills in order to have a feasible residence there. So staff, these are my findings here. It's sloped to the point that it qualifies as environmentally sensitive, and the rate is higher than the average for properties within the county and such. It would not adversely impact the public health, safety, or welfare, nor alter the character of the general vicinity, and it meets the finding requirements. So staff recommends approval with the 3 conditions typical of a variance application. So a run, I guess, makes water features of run. That's all I have.
Did you have any comments from neighbors?
Curious questions, and then once they realize they're like, that's a pretty hilly part of the thing, I would expect the same support if I was asking for something like that, given the circumstances of the candidates. So it's been very positive received.
Would you like to speak? Are you the applicant?
I am.
You are?
I am. I'm Stephen Bergman. I don't really have anything necessarily to add. It's just looking to put a shed, storage shed on the property. If you saw the topographical, it's really steep.
You can't even see it, I'm not telling you, up there on the little hill.
Yeah, if you drive by, you will see the
I saw a
house.
wall of gravel from the driveway, and I was like,
Yeah. So
It's pretty crazy.
it's quite steep.
it's crazy.
Do you have any other questions? All right, thank you.
Motion for application number S-2022-13 for variance on 629 Glass Pike with the 3 conditions of approval.
I'll second.
We have a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Approved, and she'll be in touch with us.
Good deal. Thank you all.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is training opportunities.
So the ADU conference, I mentioned it on Zoom. It's available online. We can send out the links again if you guys didn't get it from Matt. We're going to try to get some days together with meeting opportunities for webinars and otherwise for you guys to come in and either watch it or watch it on your own time and send us an email confirming that you watched it.
Okay.
We won't really quiz you on the topics, but we trust that you'll tell us the truth. In addition, I sent out a reminder, about a 30-day reminder, so that the financial interest statements and the open records forms are due around April 1st. We can have the files printed in the office. You can get it notarized by Janie, and we will then send you off to the clerk's office to drop it off when they're completed. So please get them in. It's just since you guys are...
So everybody can find this, we know.
Yeah, everyone can find you, and we know how much, if we go and rob you, how much money you make, or something like that.
Do
But
you have any other items on the agenda?